Lawmakers say they would consider filing articles of impeachment against Department of Justice officials, most notably Attorney General Pam Bondi, after the partial release of the Epstein files on Friday, many of which were redacted. Representatives Khanna and Thomas Massie co-sponsored a bill requiring the DOJ to release all files related to the investigation into convicted sex offender, the late Jeffrey Epstein.
Since the bill was nearly unanimously passed, the DOJ was legally required to release all the files, but they only released a portion, saying the department needed to finish redacting them to protect the identities of victims or minors. Here was Khanna during speaking on Friday.
Thomas Massie and I will continue to explore all options to fight to make sure that they comply with the law, whether that is holding people in inherent contempt, recommending people for prosecution, recommending impeachment, or private lawsuits.
And here was Thomas Massie on Sunday.
Most expeditious way to get justice for these victims is to bring inherent contempt against Pam Bondi.
I mean, I hate the partisan games in Congress because I'm amongst the people of the large majority of the Americans that feel like Congress is just doing nothing. And so attacking one another, bringing somebody in the Trump administration up on impeachment charges just feels annoying and frustrating and meritless, especially when we just spent, 60 days, people not getting paid and them also not doing their job. So there's a lot that's annoying about that. But I also think, like they said, they had 30 days to release all these files. I know there was a wealth of information and a lot that may be overwhelming, but for somebody at the helm of it, like Pam Bondi, who touted having the book on her desk or whatever
the client
list, she's the one, she's part of the problem here. So you better come up with a reason and a full she should have been strategically planning the last 30 days out on how she was going to explain not releasing everything from the woman who said she had the client list. I think that is the first thing. And people are rightfully angry. Like, there's some redacted files, like we talked about earlier, that are redacted without explanation. Some full pages that are just black. And that's part of the agreement, is that you need to explain why anything would be redacted. Minors, everybody understands. And then people really want answers to, and going back to our earlier conversation, on why he got this deal in 2007 that seemed beneficial to Epstein out of anyone, who is such an egregious offender of the law, somebody who we know now from that New York Times article that we talked about earlier. One of his colleagues told the FBI that he had child pornography obsession back then, 30 years ago, and nobody was really seriously looking into it. Who was protecting him? Who was protecting him? Who was working alongside him in the government? And what the answers are. And I think the more that Pam Bondi kind of pushes this off and tries to act like this is baseless and meritless and like this may be some kind of witch hunt, the worse that it'll get for her. Because as we've seen between Thomas Massie and Khanna, they are relentless in their pursuit of this. I think this will be the defining factor of some of their political lives, how much they've invested in this. We've seen them almost every Sunday or once a week on a show, one of them talking about specifically this, even when there were several other things happening in the news, big headlines. They stuck to this Epstein case. And so I don't think that they're going to go anywhere. And so this is just going to be constantly, on like just a tick on Pam Bondi's back that she never can get off unless she addresses it head on and properly.
She should have been preparing for it well before the 30 days. She should have been preparing them for release from the beginning of the administration, right? And that obviously didn't happen. She made this bungled this interview about how she had the client list on her desk. And even people within the DOJ and the FBI were sort of pinning the blame on her anonymously for not handling the file situation correctly. And now here we are back at the same place again, where she is rightfully getting some of the blame for the inability to satisfy the appetite of the public, and to do what the law passed by Congress requires, right? And so I understand why they're moving forward with the impeachment articles, but I also very much agree with your complaint that Congress's priorities seem so out of whack right now, where for the Republicans, at least, you would think that they would be singularly focused on codifying Trump's agenda, right? If he signs an executive order, you should immediately introduce a bill in the House or in the Senate to actually make that law so that it doesn't get immediately overturned when the next president comes in and signs a bunch of executive orders just erasing what Trump did. And instead, we're still arguing about ACA subsidies and impeaching Pam Bondi. Like, it just seems so unserious to me, Even Democratic Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia came out and said that he's not interested in looking at impeachment at this time. I am curious about what that means and why the Democrats aren't all on board, whether they think that it's just not going to go anywhere, so it's not worth their time. Maybe they want to continue to have that healthcare fight. I'm not sure. But the fact that someone from the Democratic Party would come out and basically put the brakes on this effort by Ro Khanna is pretty telling, I think, about what we can expect from this, which is probably not a lot.
Well, I think that Democrats have a lot of wind against their back, showing from the last election and understanding that President Trump's approval rating is not that great, understanding that people, even if the overall goal of tariffs are one thing, people are feeling differently about the economy and how he's done so far on that. And I think overwhelmingly, there are a lot of thoughts and feelings, whether strong for or against what President Trump's agenda has been the first year. And Democrats understand that. And so they know that with this wind beneath their wing, if they get some more policy and speak to specific policy that is regional, kind of like Abigail Spanberger did in Virginia, and not talk about President Trump so much, they just use the wind against their backs and talk about those policies, that might be a winning message, rather than try to look like they're going after political foes like they did for the entire last 4 years, attacking Donald Trump almost every day. And as we saw for the highest Democrat in the land running for president, Kamala Harris, that wasn't a winning issue. People wanted you to talk directly to what's happening every day in the economy and what policies you're putting forward. And so I think attacking Pam Bondi or bringing her up in inherent contempt charges will seem like another one of those things that we're constantly criticizing Congress for doing. And they know that as we go into a midterm year, that might not be the best agenda. But I did see with inherent contempt that doesn't actually require Senate approval. So they can move forward if they would like to bring Pam Bondi to make her answer to this stuff. They can move forward without Senate approval, and they'll actually be able to find Pam Bondi daily until the documents are released, which again, I don't know how this all plays out with her actually paying it or what the protocol is after that, but the fact that there'll be a fine that she has to consider or has to justify for days or even weeks will be one of those things that will keep the pressure on for her to do something else. So hopefully she just makes the right decision and follows the law and releases all the documents and explains why this has been such a blank show that everyone's been, when we've been following along for the ride, she's just dragging the American public for the ride. And even as somebody, and I tell Robbie this all the time, I was not interested in pursuing the Epstein files to this degree, right? After he died and after Ghislaine Maxwell was brought to justice, I was kind of like, okay, as I saw the victims move forward, that made me start to think about, oh, wow, there's people that really still think that these files should be fully released. And obviously part of it was just hearing how the Democrats got riled up about what's in there. So I fell for it and was like, wait, what is in there, right? Some of it which we've seen for years now. But I do think now that we're here, you can't put it back in the bottle. You can't it's already spilled milk, like you can't put it back in. So we have to kind of move forward with what the American public has already had access to and understands. And she has to release all the information and explain why so much hasn't been released yet and why she's not following the law.
Yeah, the only final point I'll make on this is that I know Robbie says this a lot and I do agree with him, is that people are probably not going to be satisfied no matter what ultimately comes out, just like people weren't satisfied with the JFK files or whatever else was released. It's just, people want there to be a really broad, far-reaching conspiracy and they want a smoking gun. And with whatever redactions are made, even if there weren't redactions, I think the reality is that if there's a cover-up going on, the cover-up's not going to be explained in the files, right? Like, come on, like the government's just going to release the evidence of their own cover-up. I just think no matter what happens, people are going to be disappointed.
But you do think there might be a cover-up going on?
There might be. I know. Who's behind it? There could be any number of explanations, right? All right, up next, comedian Tim Dillon shares his take on Erica Kirk's endorsement of Vice President J.D. Vance. We'll be right back after this.